Hey, what's up, guys? It's Mark. I'm back talking about fantasy football. Been a little bit since my last video, and first of all, I wanted to apologize about that last draft that I did. The second half of the video kind of got corrupt for some reason, so I didn't get to post it. But I hope you don't hold that against me, and I'm gonna let you know like how that team went and kind of follow that team throughout the season. So yeah, but if you have any questions about like how I did on that draft or like why I chose the strategy I did. Let me know. I know most of you have probably already drafted by now, though, so kind of apologize for that. I feel bad that I wasn't able to kind of keep up with some of you, like going into your draft day. But at the same time, though, like if you didn't get the guys you wanted, it's not over for you, and you can make a lot of moves in the season that are going to matter, and that's kind of the mantra with this fantasy football is that like it really doesn't. How you draft is not going to determine if you win your league. What's going to determine if you win your league, and this is what the fantasy footballers say all the time, is that making the right moves on the right players at the right time. And that's what I'm going to be starting to get into today. I'm going to talk about like some of the early waiver wire strategy before week one, and kind of share with you some pointers of things that I do, so that way you can start approaching the waiver strategically to win. So. But first of all, I got a few questions from Nathan. He had some questions that I think would be good to share on the show, so that way you can kind of get to know a little bit about who I am instead of just somebody who's rambling about fantasy football. So let's take a look. So silverware up or down in the dishwasher. So I usually put it down. I think I don't really think about that a lot, but I usually kind of just put it down because it's like, I don't know, just more instinctive for some reason. But yeah. And then vanilla or chocolate ice cream. That really depends on the day. Like I really like vanilla though, because like with vanilla, like you can actually turn it into like cookies and cream or like cookie dough or something if you mix vanilla or if you mix like cookie pieces in the vanilla. So there's more like versatility if you're building around the vanilla base, I think. So I actually really like vanilla ice cream. Apple juice or orange juice. And that's easy for me. Orange juice is healthy, builds vitamin C. Apple juice, honestly, probably just causes diabetes more than anything. California or New York. So I've been to New York more, so I kind of like that. I'm not a big fan of New York City personally, but I really like the upstate New York area. I think that area is very nice. I've been to California once, San Francisco. That was cool, but I couldn't really imagine myself living there. And then if there's any one active football player who you could interview, who would it be and why? Okay, so active football player. That's a tough question, actually. I don't know, actually. That's a really interesting one. Trying to think of people that have an interesting story that would be admirable. Probably Adam Thielen, I think, because Adam Thielen is a guy that had to go through a lot of adversity. He was undrafted, really was not looked at in college, and then now he's like arguably a top 5 to 10 receiver in the league. So I would interview him because I really want to hear his story about how he really came out of nowhere to become a Pro Bowl receiver. I think that's what I would want to see. So good questions. I appreciate that. And next what we're going to be doing is talking about the waivers. So, and the thing is like waivers is really important because if you if you draft well, like even if you draft like well, like you're gonna have to follow the waiver wires because things are gonna be changing throughout the season, and like a lot of times like you really like players that you might have taken really high, like things are gonna change. So that's why earlier I was talking about like I don't really like using the word bust, is because like things change a lot with these players over time. And I personally would say that like try to like really pay attention to what's going on these teams. Try to like pay attention to what's going on with your players and your opponent's players, so that way you can potentially game plan some trades. So let's first talk about like the waiver wire strategy and what you want to do. So first of all, like during the week, it's not really going to apply for this week because probably everybody's cleared waivers. But basically, like after the game, in case you didn't know, like nobody's going to be able to be claimed off waivers like during the whole Sunday to Monday because everybody's still finishing their games. And then Tuesday is when you could start adding, and that'll basically kind of determine, like which guys you're going to get. And it's typically like some leagues you have to like put in money to like bid on players. Other ones you get off. It's based off your position of how you score that week, how you're standing. Like if you did the worst, then you'll get the first waiver wire pickup. But basically, like the thing you want to do is you really want to pay attention and do a lot of research on that Tuesday, because that is going to be so important to fill those positions for you. So let's give examples of guys that are pretty much waiver wire pickups last year. So Philip Lindsay was one. Philip Lindsay was, everybody was talking about Royce Freeman at the time. Philip Lindsay kind of burst onto the scene. And I honestly wasn't very high on him at first because I just saw it as kind of like a flash in the pan, kind of like TreQuan was 2 years ago. But it turns out Lindsay was a Pro Bowl running back. Other guys, like depending on like how smart their people in your league were about the Le'Veon Bell contract situation, James Conner was available in some leagues. You also had like some other guys that got picked up that ended up being like incredible value, like John Brown for the early part of the season. Tyler Boyd was pretty much like another one of those. Tyler Lockett even. Quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield was cleared off waivers for a while after Tyrod Taylor got hurt. Just like things like that. Like you could really like fill your positions well with some of these players off waivers, but you really have to there's a lot of like gambling to a degree to which guys are going to have which risk or not, but really have to pay attention on Tuesday and do a lot of research for how you can build your roster. So what do you do when you find that guy that you want on your team? So the number one strategy, and this is really only relevant if you stream kickers. This is why I like kickers in the last round. The first position that you're going to drop is your kicker. And why do I say this? Because ultimately the skill player that you're going to get off waivers is more valuable than a kicker that, especially if you took in the last round of the draft like I've been suggesting, then you could drop that kicker and essentially get a replacement or get him back when he clears waivers, but you're holding a skill player that has more value than that current kicker has. If that makes sense, because like let's say that like for the example of Philip Lindsay, like let's say that like you had Philip Lindsay and you decided to drop another running back, like a running back who started poorly last year, like Chris Carson, for example. But Chris Carson ended up also being a top 15 running back, so you may have just cost yourself 2 running backs that would have been helpful. But instead what you do is you keep all your skill players, you drop the kicker, or you drop the defense if you took the defense in the last round, because you're playing off the stream matchup anyway. Those are the least valuable positions for you. Get those skill players. And then the beauty of it is that like when you have like multiple skill players, you could do a 2-for-1 trade, and then the only other roster position you'll need to fill is that kicker back that you just dropped. So you're upgrading your roster by virtue of picking up an extra skill player for that kicker. If that makes sense. Let me know if you have any like questions about that. But that is like huge strategy that you have to use, because there's so many times I see people drop like really good players that had bad weeks, and then it's just not a very good move. So an example of that was like I heard something on Fantasy Footballers that like somebody like Will Disley had a good week 1, and they bought into his hype, and then they're like, oh, I should drop Zach Ertz. It's like, no, that's stupid. You don't drop Zach Ertz. He's one of the top 3 tight ends in this league. And I'm sure that guy probably regretted it the rest of the season, because Will Disley went on IR with, I think, a ruptured patella or something. So, sorry, water break. But yeah, so that's what you want to do, is you want to drop the kicker first, because it gives you so much more value in trades. If you have a guy like Greg Zuerlein, for example, let's say your defense is like more mid-tier like the Browns, just drop the Browns. Because frankly, like they're going to have some good matchups and bad matchups. It's not going to cost you a lot, as an example. And then what you want to do is like when you have all these players, like don't drop them until you get to Saturday evening into Sunday morning. And the reason why is because when you own a player for a certain amount of time, they're going to take like 24 to 48 hours to clear the waivers. And if you game plan it enough to the Sunday 1 p.m. Eastern, then they're not going to be available for the rest of the week. So you're basically blocking your other players of getting a guy that they could pick up and give you good mid-round value. So like as an example, let's say that you have a middle-tier running back who's not great. Like, I don't really know why you would drop Peyton Barber, but let's use that as an example. Let's say that like he's had like a mediocre game. You pick up a guy that you think is more handcuff value. Like let's say anything were to happen to Zeke Elliott, you pick up Tony Pollard. So like if you're going to actually like, let's say Zeke stays held out and you pick up Tony Pollard, do not draft or they did not drop the Ronald Jones type, sorry, I didn't, that wasn't the same. Peyton Barber, Ronald Jones, both not same difference, I guess. But like, drop one of those before you drop the guy that's got more value, but wait to drop them until like the Sunday night, because basically like, the last thing you want to have happen is like somebody, let's say you drop Ronald Jones right away, and then let's say that Peyton Barber gets hurt, and then all of a sudden like they give Ronald Jones, it's like, oh, this guy's good, 200 rush yards. Then you literally like, you just gave your opponent an ability to like fix that right away. And I mean, yes, you might have lost that, but it's worse if your opponent picks him up and he puts that up against you. So that's why you want to wait till the very end of the week to drop some of these guys if you can. Fill those kickers on Sunday morning if you can, and drop a skill position player if it doesn't end up amounting to much. And then the fourth big rule that I want to talk about is that you want to watch what people are dropping. And I've kind of hinted on that to a degree, but like, a lot of people are not going to make smart moves, and they're going to drop players that they should not be dropping. So let's take a look at some examples here, because these are pretty egregious ones in some of these leagues. So, well, that one's not bad. Like, they pick up Ty Montgomery, drop Darren Sproles. That makes sense, because honestly, like, I don't see what Darren Sproles' value is going to be except being a nuisance to those other running backs. So, like, you pick up Darren Sproles and you drop Mark Andrews at tight end. I don't think that's good value at all. Like, Mark Andrews, I don't really like him, but he has more value long-term than Sproles does. And then, okay, this one is really bad. So he dropped Geronimo Allison for Jerron Brown. And yes, Geronimo Allison is not 100% healthy right now, but that guy has proven that he can play in an offense that needs a number 2 receiver. It's going to be between him and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Whereas Jerron Brown is just like, they got other new receivers there that are competing with him. Like, that's just such a bad like move there. But so what he should have done is, if he was really interested in a guy like Jerron Brown, he should have dropped the kicker. But I mean, this is probably a guy that reached for somebody like Will Lutz, and then he was kind of stuck in a position where he couldn't do that anyway because he spent a really high pick on a kicker. So you see how this is all kind of come into play? Like, that's why I do this stuff, is because it basically lets me invest a ton in the running backs and receivers, because those are the guys that are going to be filling the majority of the positions you start. So, yeah. So now that I've gotten into those strategies, let's talk about guys that you want to try to target to pick up hopefully at the beginning of the week. And I'm going to be like getting into some of these guys that I really like that might still be available. So number one priority is to fill those handcuff positions for those running backs that are holding out. Like, I know Zeke Elliott, they're talking about the contract like being resolved, but it's still not resolved, and you never know, like, he might just storm out of the meeting and say like, Jerry Jones hates me, or some like ridiculous thing because it's Zeke Elliott. And then all of a sudden, like, Tony Pollard is still very valuable. Like, if he is on your waivers, like, you have to pick him up, because that is like, with that line, like, you got a potentially top 10, top 5 running back sometimes. Like, so you got to make sure you have him, especially if you own Zeke Elliott. And also, like, I'm personally, like, I own Tony Pollard in a couple leagues. I'm trying to trade him away while his value is still high in case Zeke Elliott does sign. So there's a lot of, like, you get so much value if he doesn't play, because you might be able to, like, give the Zeke Elliott owner him as his handcuff. And that is really valuable to him, especially with all this drama that's going on. Same thing in I keep calling them San Diego. They should still be there. But Los Angeles Chargers, like, Melvin Gordon, they're talking about trading him now. So it doesn't look like he's going to sign there. And basically they're going to be down to Austin Eckler is the guy that's got the hype. But do not forget about Justin Jackson, because that is the guy that is the first and second down back. He is going to be getting all the touches on those early downs. And especially if you're in a standard league, like, that's going to be a lot of touchdown potential for you as well. So Justin Jackson going at the end of these drafts, he might still be available if you're in like 10 to 12 team leagues. 14 team, not really, but that's another guy that you really want to target, especially if you own Melvin Gordon. Another situation, so like LaShawn McCoy got dropped by the Bills, and I thought like, all right, well, this is the end of the guy's career. But then he got signed by the Chiefs, which I think is honestly like the best thing that could happen to him, because Damian Williams has got question marks. LaShawn McCoy is obviously very explosive and a very good pass catcher. So, and this is what the team needs. It's like a good pass-catching running back. Like, Damian Williams does that, but LaShawn McCoy, so much experience. he's so durable. Like, I see this guy just being huge value for you. If he is for some reason on your waivers, like, you got to get him. But I highly doubt that at this point because everybody kind of knows about that news. Devin Singletary, another one. So, ironically, like, I liked LaShawn McCoy leaving the Bills, but I like Devin Singletary being on the Bills because the guys he's got ahead of him are TJ Yeldon, who, like, that guy is just not, like, anything worth mentioning. And then, I mean, maybe if you're in a PPR league. And then you got, like, Frank Gore, who, like, that guy's, like 48 or some ridiculous thing like that. Like, is that guy going to really, like, take the majority of the touches? Like, you got to go with Singletary because he was a guy drafted pretty high. He's shown a lot of ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. So, good running backs to target there. I really like those. Other receivers that I've been noticing. So, now about to the receivers that I've been noticing. So, like, you got one that I really like is Terry McLaurin from the Redskins. So, I don't really like the Redskins offense in general. I think they've got a lot of problems they got to work out. But the nice thing about the Redskins, though, is that, like, they really do not have anybody to throw to. And they're going to probably be down in a lot of these games. They're not going to be able to just pound the ball up the middle every single time. So, especially now they got rid of Josh Doxson, who was basically just worthless. Like, now Terry McLaurin is filling into that position, and he has potential to be the downfield threat. They took this guy in, like, the third round, so they have a lot of belief in him and his abilities. Went to Ohio State, a school that's, like, pretty good at producing great receivers in the NFL. That's where Michael Thomas is from. And I really like this guy's upside. He's available on waivers. I would try to get him if you got a guy that's, you know, like, not particular. Like, let's say you got, like, for some reason you drafted Michael Crabtree or some terrible pick like that. Like, get Terry McLaurin, drop Crabtree, or, like, something along those lines. Another one that I like that is TreQuan Smith. I was talking about Michael Thomas, so let's keep on that team, the Saints. So TreQuan Smith is generally not getting drafted either. Instead, guys like Ted Ginn are going ahead of him. And I like Ted Ginn a little more early season, but TreQuan Smith, like, he has a lot of potential. And this team clearly needs a number 2 wide receiver, and I think that TreQuan Smith is a guy that can pretty much, like, fill in to that and give you a lot of value there. So I really like him, and that's somebody that you can basically get at the end of waivers. Another guy I really like, if you're in a PPR league, like, Randal Cobb is not getting drafted. And think about it, like, think about how much Dak Prescott liked throwing to Cole Beasley, who's really, like, a pretty mediocre football player. Like, Randal Cobb is easily a better player than Beasley was. But he's been dealing with injuries. So if this guy comes back, like, healthy and can revert to his old Packers form, like, huge value for the Cowboys there, because I think that he's going to, like, Dak doesn't really throw down the field a lot, so that could limit some of Amari Cooper's value. Michael Gallup, I'm still kind of, like, not sure what he's going to look like either. So I think Randal Cobb is a lot of great value that's generally going undrafted as well. Let's move to tight ends. So another guy that is surprisingly going at the very end is TJ Hockenson. And he's probably still on waivers in like 12 to 10 team leagues kind of thing. But this is a guy that, like, I don't really like at the beginning of the season because I think he might have some trouble adjusting to the NFL. But a guy that was taken number 8 overall in the draft, compared to guys like Kelsey and Gronk, there's so much value here. Like, but personally, like, if you're in a position where, like, you're using a tight end that's, like, pretty much, like, mediocre or not even worth your time, like Jordan Reed, for example, or like Jason Witten, for example, or like Jimmy Graham, who I don't like. Like, there's just so many, like, you're better off, like, taking a guy that's, like, got so much more upside than that in TJ Hockenson, because he's going at the end of drafts. It's really not going to cost you very much to pick him up, especially if you drop the kicker, like I've been saying. And then maybe, like, if somebody gets injured or one of your other players, like, is not looking as good at their outlook, you can pick him back up. But TJ Hockenson, a guy you could kind of buy low on, and he could surprise because they're playing Arizona the first week, which is not exactly the most stellar of defenses, especially with Patrick Peterson being injured. And the team in general just doesn't have a lot of great targets to go to. So I like that a lot. And then defenses that I really like the Jadeveon Clowney siding with the Seahawks. I think that's like, they have like some solid pieces, not very like, not as big as the Legion of Boom. Like, they're not anywhere near that hype. Sorry, but there's so much value on that, and I think that like you have to consider the Seahawks as a defense that's generally not going drafted, but their first week is against the Cincinnati Bengals, which like that is going to be a ton of turnovers, like a ton of Andy Dalton fumbles or interceptions or something like that. And then you're gonna like he gets so much value out of that. And then like let's say they get I could see like the Seahawks being like one of the biggest pickups that you want to get, especially if you took a defense at the end. I picked them up in the league that I just drafted, not the QBs. I switched them for the Titans. I drafted Titans but then I switched for the Seahawks. And, you know, I really like those moves. I don't know if I like them the whole season, but I really like that week 1 matchup. I think you got to take advantage of that if you can. So, yeah. But anyway, so that concludes my video about waivers. I'm going to try to see if I can get another video in before the weekend. And try to talk about like maybe some start sits or some trades or something like that. Let me know what you want me to talk about, and I'll try to see if I can get it posted. So, but thanks for your time, and thanks for bearing with me in spite of some of the video technical difficulties. So, all right, thanks guys. Bye.